Okay. Hi all, welcome to the webinar training for reporting hospitalizations in CROWNWeb. We will go over the steps to correctly report hospitalizations and methods for fixing incorrectly reported hospital events to make sure that your data is as accurate as you can get it. And again, I hope you've had a chance to log into CROWNWeb. Hopefully this will help you update a patient's record in real time on your own screen as you follow along with our steps. So before we jump into the CROWNWeb section, let's go over a couple of things about reporting hospitalizations. It is important for facilities to maintain this accurate information in CROWNWeb for continuity of patient care, because as you know, other facilities can see this information as well once they have admitted a patient. So you guys can see what the kind of medical history is for the patient in terms of hospitalizations and medications and anything like that that you're familiar with in the clinical section. Hospitalization reporting is also important to maintaining or reducing patients' mistreatment habits. That way you know whether they've missed treatment or if they were hospitalized and when they're due back for another treatment. Incorrectly reported hospitalizations can negatively affect a facility's QIP score. So that's why you want to make sure you're not over-reporting anything, but that you're reporting what did happen correctly. And that the way you report also implicates how you do on the project that you're assigned to for this year with the network. Where am I? Okay. Okay. Couple of steps. I'm trying to create a little shortcut to help you remember what you need to report hospitalizations. Gather all the information that you're going to need ahead of time so you don't complete part of it now and then forget to finish it off later, or say you're going to look up the rest of the info and come back to it. Gather everything you need right away. So get used to knowing what those fields are that you need to collect. Then edit the patient's clinical section in CROWNWeb. That's where hospitalizations are reported, in the clinical section. Add any hospitalization events that are not already added. Sometimes they can be imported by the batch, but a lot of times you do have to manually enter this information, especially to ensure that it's accurate. And review to ensure that whatever data is in there, whether you or somebody in your office entered it manually or it was imported by batch. So be sure to review for accuracy. Okay, what to report and what not to report. So urgent ER visits with or without a hospital admission should be reported in CROWNWeb, and you could designate them as such. Any unplanned admissions to an acute care hospital or other types of admissions to hospitals. But please note what you should not report as a hospitalization in CROWNWeb, and that is scheduled labs or procedures that are going to be performed at a hospital. So if it's pre-planned, you do not report it as a hospitalization. Do not report doctor's visits as hospitalizations. If the doctor happens to be located in a hospital, don't report that as a hospitalization. Urgent care visits, like, you know, those clinics that you can hop into and have them look at a cut or something like that, don't report those as hospitalizations. And if you're going in for observation, don't report those in CROWNWeb. Those do not count as hospitalizations. Okay. When you're ready to report the hospitalization and you know it falls into one of those categories that should be reported, make sure you have the date that the patient was admitted to the hospital. So you need to know the actual date that they were admitted to the hospital. You should know the full hospital name as well, because you can't leave it as something vague, especially if there's a community of hospitals and they all share a very common name. Make sure you put the whole name so we can keep track of where the patient actually was hospitalized. Also, make sure to correctly report the type or reason for the hospitalization. We will get to that in a minute as well to show you what your options are for reporting. And make sure that if a patient was reported in like end of January, you'll report them as a January hospitalization. Don't report them as a February hospitalization. If their one hospitalization event overlapped January and February, it counts as one hospitalization in January. If it's January 31st, it's a January hospitalization and should be reported in the January clinical. So make sure you do not report it a second time as February because it's the same hospitalization. Why am I scrolling so quickly? Excuse me. Okay, here's some examples that we can go over real quick. So one hospitalization event would be a patient hospitalized on January 31st through February 5th. This counts as one hospitalization for January. So their admit date would be January 31st and their discharge date would be February 5th. I hope that makes sense. You report it just once for January, not for February. Then here's another example of a one event hospitalization. Patient was admitted to hospital A and then was transferred to hospital B.
You want lesson this training script for the...
Excuse me, we can hear. Can you please mute your phone in the back? So patient was admitted to hospital A and then transferred to hospital B. You report the admission date for hospital A and then the discharge date for hospital B. So you don't want to create a duplicate record if this was all one hospitalization for the patient. Does that make sense? Does anyone have any questions on that? You can unmute if you have a question or please type it into chat. So if a patient was admitted into one hospital and then transferred into a different hospital, report it as the one hospital, the first hospital, as the admit, and the second hospital as the discharge. So here's an example of two different admissions in the same month. So a patient can be hospitalized multiple times within the same month as long as they're not related events. So a patient went to emergency room and then was hospitalized on January 4th through January 8th. That was one hospitalization. Then the patient was again admitted to a hospital for not as a continuous event from the first one, but as a separate event. You would report it as a second event. So you would see in CROWNWeb that there are two hospitalizations reported for January for that same patient. So it would look correct this way. Okay, I see. Barb and Jewel say, if they transfer to a higher level of care, does that mean that the patient would be still under that one hospitalization or under two hospitalizations? Please clarify. Okay, we'll come back to that in a minute. It's one hospitalization, but only the second one is reported. Okay, you're going to have to jump in on that, Barb. Barbara, are you muted? All right. We'll come back to them at the end. Okay, for the CROWNWeb stuff, I hope you guys are logged in to CROWNWeb and you have a patient pulled up. So you would see this screen, this little screenshot on the right. You would go to the Patients tab at the top, look for the UPI, and then once you open the Patient's Attributes page, you would go to the Clinical section on the left. Then when you open the clinical section, the clinical data summary, you will see the screenshot below, which has the clinical months, the collection types, your facility name or other facilities that have collected clinical for the patient, and the status. So you would click on the month that you want to report, and also you can click here so you can report for the following month as well. Okay. Once you're in here, locate patient in the clinical summary. You go, oh, why isn't it never moving when I need it to? Here we go. Okay. You enter the facility CCN, your facility CCN, then don't put anything in the facility NPI and click go. You will see your facility's name appear on the right, and you could drop down to make sure you're selecting the correct facility if you are over 2 facilities that share a CCN. Can somebody please mute their phones in the back? We can hear you talking. Once you've selected your facility name, you select the hemodialysis collection type, and then the clinical month that you're trying to enter. And then you will skip over the next 2 boxes. Leave this one blank, please. The display patients, leave it blank and just hit go. And then all of your patients that were in your facility in that clinical month will appear here. So we have clinical month of December selected. If you leave the other fields blank and hit go, you will have all of your December patients appear in this box. Okay. If the patient does not appear in that box, let me show that one more time. If the patient does not appear in that box, make sure that you go to the admit discharge summary and the treatment summary to make sure that there's no discharge info and that the patient is correctly admitted into your facility for that reporting month. Okay, so after you go into the clinical section for your patient, you would click on hospitalization on the left at the bottom. All reported hospitalizations for that reporting month will be listed here. Here's a little screenshot below of the hospitalization tracker within the clinical section. You can click add to include additional hospitalizations, and if you see one listed here that you want to edit or you're not sure is fully accurate, you can click on it and open that record so you could edit it. If the patient was not hospitalized during this reporting month, if there was no admission to any hospital for that month, you can click NA. To edit the hospitalization info, you have to fill in all of the sections that you see here. CROWNWeb issues a hospitalization ID, which sticks with every instance of a hospitalization. So if there were 3 hospitalizations in a given month, you would be issued 3 IDs for that patient. And they will all be reported and listed in that prior screen. The admission date. Make sure you have the exact admit date for the hospitalization. All hospital visits. Here in the screenshot, you will see the types of hospital visits can include emergency room visits, which is usually day in and day out, then a hospitalization stay, and then an ER visit resulting in a hospital admission. So those are the 3 types of options you can choose from here. And the name of hospital. Please enter the full name so we can identify exactly what it is, so it's not vague and confusing, and that we could keep track of what is the most frequently used hospital in your area. That's good information to have. And then discharge date is the date the patient leaves that hospital, or that hospital, or when that hospitalization ends. Okay, so all of these fields should be completed. You should be able to gather all this info. You should not select NA for any of these if you can avoid it. The only thing that could have an NA is if the patient is still in the hospital. They have not yet been discharged from the hospital. You can select NA as the discharge date, but you should have a completed admit date, hospital name, and the hospital reason. You should know why the patient was hospitalized. The only other time you can select this NA down here is if the patient was not hospitalized at all, so there should be no hospitalization IDs listed here. Okay, so we will be sending out cleanup reports, hopefully in the next month or two, where we identify instances of NAs in places where there shouldn't be any NAs, or if there is a duplicate admission, like you have 2 admissions on the same day, or like an admission from January 1st to January 10th, and then another admission for January 2nd to January 10th. We're going to send you all of those instances so you can take a look and fix, and that'll include clear instructions with screenshots on how to do that. We also will be posting the step-by-step guide into the QIA section, so we'll show you the link for that, and we will get that up there as soon as we can. And any questions? Let me see in the chat. I don't see any questions in chat. Would anybody like to ask a question out loud or type something in? Was there anything that's confusing or inaccurate? Anybody? So make sure that you verify that the data that was batched in is correct. So it's important to keep track of all the hospitalizations and review them personally to make sure that everything is matching up. Anybody, any questions? Need me to go back to any slides? Was this really easy for you guys?
So you guys are letting Svetlana off awful light. This is Barbara. So I hope you don't have any questions and you're ready to go through and take care of your data and make sure your data is correct. I have received root cause analysis for a couple facilities already, so please remember those are due. You should be doing your root cause analysis off your discharge codes, which are your ICD-10 codes, because if you don't know why your patients were hospitalized, how can you do a root cause analysis? So do remember those are due by next week. If you have any questions or concerns, you need to let me know early. If you all jump on me on the last day, I won't be able to help you all. So let's see. We have a question that came in. Good morning. To clarify, if Fresenius staff change CROWNWeb data manually and do not change the clinical system, the next month's batch will override the manual entry. The changes must be made in our clinical system and then verified in CROWNWeb after the batch is complete the following month.
Okay, so that means, again, that if you change something manually, if you see incorrect batch data in CROWNWeb, you need to make sure to fix it, but also fix it in your batch system so that it doesn't undo what you just did manually in CROWNWeb. Another question I did receive was whether hospitalization reporting is something new. No. It's been required since 2012.
I will say, though, even though it started in 2012, this kind of clarification data was put together with Svetlana and Leah, the data manager from Network 16 last year. So we didn't have this kind of detail before last year. So you did have to report, but you didn't have the clarification.
We actually did have all of these screenshots in Crash Course in CROWNWeb, which has been on our website for a couple of years already. So all of these screenshots that you see here were from that presentation.
How about fistula surgery? If they were admitted overnight to the hospital, so if it's the same day surgery, then no, it's not a hospitalization. If they were admitted, so they were in overnight, then yes, it is a hospitalization. It all depends on whether that patient is considered admitted to the hospital. Man, if you're admitted for a declot, we've got a problem, but that's just a medical procedure. Again, usually it's same day. They should not be admitted to the hospital for that, but if something crazy happens, and they are, it's all based on that hospital admission.
Anybody else? Well, if you have further questions about CROWNWeb or entry of hospitalizations, you could email me or the data department. We will also be posting this marvelous recording and a detailed walkthrough right here under the QIA section, under hospitalizations on our website. We will get that up as soon as we can.
Usually a couple of business days.
If that's it, we're going to wrap it up then.
Thank you, everybody. Have a good day.